Cynthia Nitch here. Going to finish up this lecture. So it's still chapter 1, but it's kind of like part 2 of it. And we ended on chapter part 1 talking about how data, information, business intelligence, and knowledge kind of fits in our lives or fits in these topics, and how that could help us have a better plan, have a better business, stuff like that. So hopefully you did that just to kind of connect what we talked about and what a real life situation would look like. All right, so moving on. So this part is really quick, it's just 2 slides. It's just talking about system thinking, basically how information and the value of information can be transformed, and so that everybody can use it within the business, right? So back in the 90s, everything used to be kind of like a silo. So all these companies had, like this had, maybe accounting had that software called Intel, and then maybe sales was some different sales, like application that you bought, just kind of that didn't connect to accounting. So overall, nothing really connected. Everybody would just kind of like send PDFs or send faxes, or send just spreadsheets, and everybody would then go from there. So obviously there was an easier way to do this, and it was to manage the different information systems and connect them. And so here would be your basically your database, and then from that database, accounting would contribute to that database and actually extract information from there based on what they needed to know from the different departments. So it was definitely an aha moment. I was actually around when enterprise systems started, and it was this like big push, almost like what Tableau is now, like using the charts and stuff. But yeah, it was a big push to have companies kind of get on board with this, so that not only were you able to send information within your company, but then with your partners and then maybe your customers and stuff like that. So now it's just a big thing. Like SAP is an enterprise system. Microsoft got into it. Salesforce does really well. So there's all these different like systems now that can talk to each other. And then the latest craze is to make it have analytics based on all these information systems and kind of make your company better, right? So SAP is an ERP system that has an analytic cloud with it, so that you can take all this information that you're sharing and then make sense of it visually. All right, so this last one, MIS department, is just who you would be if you wanted to get into computer applications and management of information systems. You'd be either a CTO or maybe a chief security officer. So all of these kind of happen. Not all of them are in every firm, but like I know that we have a technology officer for sure. We have a chief privacy officer for sure, and I'm not sure about the other ones. But yeah, so this will be on your test. You'll see it in your Connect study guide, and they will go over each one, and then you'd have to check one through multiple choice or something. So you learn those pretty quickly, and they're interesting. All right, so this is really the kind of the part of chapter 1 part 2 that I want to talk about. It's called competitive strategies. You'll find this interesting. It's a little bit kind of a left turn from what we learned in chapter 1 part 1, but I like this second half of the lecture. So when we talk about competitive advantages, it's just a plan that achieves goals to increase sales and all that jazz using data and information. But we also need to think about the strategy of it, right? Like, what's our competitive advantage? Like a feature of the product or service on which customers place a greater value than they do on similar offerings from competitors. This is a video, and it has to do with how Steve Jobs and his business strategy on a lot of his companies. So it's a really interesting video. It's not that, it's a TED Talk, but it's not long at all. And I strongly advise you to watch it. It's kind of a cool video, and you'll find yourself thinking about the video when you're like driving along, trying to find parking or something. So it kind of sticks with you. But he has this an example of how all businesses kind of boil down to convenience, right? And so he talks about how they used to harvest ice in like lakes and sell blocks of ice. And then they talked about how they used to like store blocks of ice, so people would want ice, they'd have to drive somewhere to get it. Then they talked about creating their refrigerator with a place where they could store ice. And then lastly, they talked about an ice maker in your refrigerator. So in all, with all the business dealings and procedures that they needed to do, it all boiled down to convenience was their business strategy, and which kind of most companies, if you think about it, have that as a big strategy. For example, Amazon, right? It's so convenient to use Amazon, and also like Grubhub and all those things. It's just convenience sells for sure. So it's a really interesting video if you have time to watch it and just skip through it. It's cool. Okay, all right. So this will be a big part of chapter 1's test as well, to know these 4 things, know what they are, and then actually be able to identify them between each other. So definitely you'll have this in your Connect study guide, and we'll go over it here as well. Okay, so I noticed on the test, you guys, that in the multiple choice or whatever, it'll ask you like what a SWOT analysis is, and then it might give you these 4 as a choice. So make sure you understand what these 4 are. So SWOT evaluates project position. This does industry attractiveness, choose business focus, and business strategy. So know each one of these and know what it does, okay? That'll help you on the exam. All right, so first, SWOT. So hopefully you guys have done a SWOT analysis on yourself, you know, in high school or something. And sometimes when you're in interviews, they'll ask you what a SWOT, what's your SWOT? So usually, and this is what it is, right? Your strengths, things that you do well, or things that your company does well if you owned a company. What's your weaknesses? Things that your competitors do better than you. What's your resource limitation? And opportunities, undeserved markets, emerging need of your product, and then the threats like changing regulatory environment, negative press, and all that. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I don't think the test questions are going to get really into it. I think it's more like they're going to talk about this more than that. But it's kind of nice to know those, and it's nice to know them about yourself as well. So maybe companies don't necessarily, they want to know your strengths, but companies really want to know your weaknesses, right? And then you really want to know what your opportunities are. So it's actually a good thing to do it on yourself real quick to see what they are. Okay, so let's look at some companies' competitive strategies, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So let's look at Starbucks. You can look at Nike's on your own. This is great. Please don't just go through this slide and go to the next one. If you look at these, this will make more sense, okay? So I'll click on Starbucks and the Starbucks SWOT analysis and recommendations. So you can go read through this, but the Starbucks strengths are strong coffee and coffee house branding and so forth, and then what's their weaknesses. So I would definitely just go through and just say, oh, you know, go through what are their opportunities, what are the threats. That might give you an idea of things that if you're working for a company now, you can kind of, you know, match those things up, or maybe it'll give you an idea of who you are, what's your strengths and your weaknesses by reading this or the Nike one. So I strongly, you know, suggest that you read this. There's also other SWOTs for other things if you want to look at them. Okay, let's move on. So active learning, each do a SWOT analysis on yourself. So maybe you could do that while we're talking, just so you can kind of get it in your mind, and that it's easier when a test comes around, you know exactly what that means. All right, so let's do the next one. Identifying competitive advantages with value chain analysis. What executes business strategy? So the book kind of goes into like more like a manufacturing strategy, which is kind of the easiest way to explain it. But what it does is it's like there's a strategy for your whole business, right? And then there's these micro strategies in between what helps your business run, or the way you execute stuff. So in this value chain, I just show you the value chain. We actually go through this in one of the chapters. But if you look at all these ones, you'll notice, or like what happens is they go in and do a competitive strategy. Like, how can we clean up our supplier communication? Materials handling, what does that look like? Are we renting the building for materials handling? What's the inventory look like? How much are we spending on that? How much employees are we paying for that? So all these little things and there's other micro ones within this, and how to make our business better, cheaper, greater, right? So what they do is this is like the strategy of how you actually run your business and how you can make tasks more efficient and more effective, right? So that kind of hits that bottom line, and so that we can make more money at what we're doing. All right, so examining the firm as a value chain allows managers to identify the important business processes. So one of the examples of a value chain is Tesla. They've done a really good job on theirs, and they've kind of reinvented the way people manufacture. However, Tesla has so much money, fortunately, that their value chain sometimes is unattainable for some companies, but they decided to make their own robots. They do all raw materials, which is cheaper. They do have outsourced contracts for certain things, but a lot of their heavy work is done in-house. Here's a video on Tesla's manufacturing plant. You'll notice that there's only a few humans on the floor, and they're mostly robots, robot technology. So here just like the other one with the SWOT, here's competitive strategy value chain analysis for Coca-Cola and Tesla. So just take a look at that and see how this one's interesting, what their value chain is. It's funny, like, Coca-Cola syrup is so cheap and they just make so much money. But also this value chain of Coca-Cola is very old and outdated, but they still use it, and it's still effective. So, and then there's Tesla's. So take a look at that just so that you can get the concept with the vocabulary. Okay, so the 5 forces model. This 5 force model can take up a whole lecture and a half, right? There's a lot to unpack here. So, and just know that, a lot of the tests, you'll see it on your Connect, and really pay attention to it, because they do test on this a lot. And I do like the 5 force model, but it is a little confusing because what is strong, the word strong, is a bad thing in the forces. So you'll see what I mean. Okay, so here's a video on 5 force model if you need more explanation. But these are the 5 forces that can help you be successful, or that's warning signs that you might not be successful at what you want to do. And like the perfect example would be if I wanted to open up my own coffee shop, right? So these are the questions that you would have to ask yourself. Is it a good idea to get into this industry, right? So what is the threat of substitute product or service if I was a coffee shop? Well, it would be Starbucks, or it would be Jamba Juice, or it would be like the fancy, waters, or anything like that. Anything that a customer could go in and say, I want a coffee, but then I guess I could drink a Coke Zero as well. And just things like that. What's the threat? If it's a high threat, a strong threat, then that's not good, right? So, and then the buying power, the power of customers to drive down prices. Like Starbucks is very expensive and they always increase their prices, but people still go there. But like maybe it gets to the point where they're too pricey and that they just find that Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's coffee is just as fine. And so you have your buyer power. Is the buyer power of the customer strong? And that's a bad thing, right? Strong is a bad thing when you're doing 5 forces. So yes, if I were to open up my coffee shop, buying power is strong. They can go to Starbucks, and they probably will. And hopefully I can offer them something better that they'll come to me. All right, so you see where I'm going here? So the threat of new entrants, can coffee shops pop up quickly? Yes. So that's a strong threat, right? It's a strong force. So to wrap it up, it's basically a strong force and not a good idea for a coffee shop, but they still do it. Who's your rivals? And your supplier power. So I highly suggest you watch that video. It's a pretty good video that talks about it. And I just like, my piece of advice would be on this, when you think about 5 forces, the strong is bad and weak is good, okay? So maybe you try to think of your own company and think like, if I wanted to open up a new, who knows what, and then how would you evaluate that? Would it be a good idea or a bad idea? Would it be too hard? Are there a lot of people that come into that market, or little, what's up with that, and do you have a chance? So here are the 5 forces of Starbucks and Facebook. Starbucks is great. It's very clear what their 5 forces are, but basically they're all like, stacked against them. So check this out. So competitively, they're a strong force, right? There's a lot of competitors out there, so that's not good. Bargaining power of buyers, strong force. They can go anywhere. There's coffee everywhere. Bargaining power of suppliers. They have a nice bargaining power because this is low, right? So that means like Starbucks buys a lot of coffee, so they can buy in bigger bulk than the average coffee shop, and so that they can have a bigger margin in their profit. But look at this, they're a substitute. Yeah, strong force. I could either go get Coke, Jamba Juice, or a tea, or whatever, right? And then the threat of entrance is moderate, which is interesting. I would think that's strong too, because there's always little coffee shops popping up. But anyway, read that real quick. You don't have to read everything. Just kind of go through it and kind of get the idea of what companies think about before they invest. Oh, that's me. So I wrote that same thing, active learning. Think of a business and list the 5 forces you'll come across. And I know you don't want to do it, but it's actually a pretty good exercise just to connect the word to the meaning. All right, so this one's easy. 3 generic strategies. This is the easy of the 4. So you have Porter's 3 competitive strategies. You have cost leadership. So it could be low cost, high cost leadership, right? High cost would be like a Tesla maybe, or one of those fancy cars, and low cost would be like a little Hyundai or something. Differentiation is the uniqueness, and it's broad, right? Like age group, region in the country, region in the world. And then segmentation, specific segments of the market which are not otherwise tapped by larger firms. So Netflix found a target to publish movies that wouldn't necessarily be released in movie theaters, right? But they also had the big movies, but they had the smaller movies and the older movies. So that was a market segmentation that wasn't tapped at all. I mean, I think they found their way, and then obviously look at it now. But yeah, they were like, there's so many movies out there that don't get the movie theater experience, but then they could do a sub-market, and then the sub-market basically took off and is overcoming the main market. So that's interesting. Okay, so let's look at them. Cost strategy, low cost, low cost broad market would be Walmart, and narrow market would be like Payless Shoes, even though they actually went out of business. And high cost would be Tiffany's. Differentiation strategies, unique product feature, unique product performance. I always think of Amazon with this. Exceptional service, new technologies, Amazon. Exceptional skill or experience, I'm not sure. And so just different ways that they're like, I go there because I know what I can expect. You know what I really like with this differentiated strategy was Southwest Airlines. They do things a little bit different. They let you cancel on the last minute, and they have, you can upgrade your seat. You always know what to expect with them. So that's kind of a good example of them. And then here's market segmentation. It could be personality, education, language, climate, any of these market segmentations. All right, conclusion. So we got these 4 here, right? They're called competitive strategies, and you have the SWOT, you have the value chain that's within the company. How can I make things better, effectively, and efficiently? And then I have my competitive forces. Should I even get into the business? And then I have my strategies. What's my cost strategy, and so forth. So that's it for chapter 1. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, let me know. In your modules on chapter 1, you'll notice a list of videos that will help you explain things more than I have already. And then our ultimate goal is to complete the Connect chapter 1 so you really get to know these topics. All right, thanks. Have a great day.